where we're at now is at a hacking tower at Moraine State Park. The hacking programs began in 1993. This is the second year for a hacking program. Behind you is a hacking tower. Hacking is a word used to describe raising young birds of prey for flight.
My name is Heather Johnston. I was hired by the Marine Preservation Fund to help oversee this project. Myself and another girl, Jenny Dubenstein, are in charge of feeding the birds, trying to keep track of the birds, what they're doing, the types of behavior that we're seeing. The birds were brought in when they were about between 4 and 6 weeks of age. Our records help to keep track of what the birds were doing as they progressed in age, from when they were in the boxes till we dropped the gates and the birds were able to fledge. Once they fledged, the behavioral observations became more difficult because they start to spread out across the lake. It's been about 3 weeks now since they fledged, and most of the birds have started to even disappear for a day or so at a time. We keep track of the birds by the blue leg band on their left leg. It's a band for the state. The blue color indicates what year the birds were banded in.
My name is Dorothy Weisberg. I'm a volunteer here with the Osprey program. I come out every week for at least a 4-hour shift and occasionally a little longer. I think it's a really worthwhile program. I'd like to see ospreys repopulating this part of the country again. That's why I work with this program. I do a lot of various volunteer activities for environmental concerns, and I'm really proud to be a part of this program.
I'm Will Taylor. I was hired by the Bureau of State Parks primarily for this Osprey project we have here at Moraine. This is a good example of how the Bureau of State Parks is working in coordination with several volunteer organizations such as the Marine Preservation Fund. There's been a lot of other volunteer help. In fact, this project could not have been completed without the help of many volunteers that came out and spent lots of time working with the Osprey and making this a success. The Pennsylvania Game Commission was also involved, and I'd really like to thank the Fish and Boat Commission for donating the number of trout that we have had to use this time due to the number of birds and the amount of fish that they've eaten. I think this Osprey program is going to be a great success, and I'm really glad it is a great success because the original glacial Lake Arthur was here about 20,000 years ago, and 20,000 years ago we had osprey fishing over it. So with the Osprey here now, I think that gives us a glimpse into what the past might have been like a long time ago. So I think this will be a great success, and hopefully it'll continue to be so for the next 3 years and on into the future.
Right now, at this stage, all of the ospreys that we have are now flying except for one. In 1994, we had 24 ospreys brought to Moraine State Park for reintroduction. Out of those 24, 23 are flying. The last one should be flying within the next couple days.
Okay, these nests, as far as I know, were made by a really intelligent little girl, Wes's daughter. She's around 9 years old. And there's 2 different designs. I think they started a new one this year. Okay, the first one has a board right on it. It's a solid board, and then they have grapevines around it, okay? And the sticks, I think, are attached in the board. And then in them, they lay hemlock leaves inside of them. All right, and the second design here is a solid nest. You can see this one here. Okay, that's a solid nest. And then these lay on top of those trellises there that are the platforms for the bottom.
The tower was constructed by a lot of different organizations. Armstrong Utilities, Central Electric had a lot to do with constructing the tower. The program was originally initiated by the Marine Preservation Fund, which is a volunteer group dedicated to helping preserve Moraine State Park building facilities and other wildlife management programs in the park.
Now, the first night I did an overnight here, we went up there at 6 o'clock in the morning to feed the birds, and one bird, A1, had had its leg stuck through the nest and through the trellis. And I had a hard time getting him out of there. He was probably stuck there for well over an hour. And it really made a big difference in his development. He was one of the youngest birds, and then he ended up being the last one to be released. He also had a problem a couple days ago, had gotten stuck in the water. The other 2 birds in the cage with him just jumped on his head and jumped on his wings, and, you know, they basically try to kill them if something's wrong. They don't try to help each other at all. So they were adding to his problem of his leg being stuck. Finally, I got in there with some sticks and moved enough of the branches around from the nest and then stuck a stick under his leg and allowed him to finally get out of the nest. But that really hampered his development. He was one of the slowest birds of all the birds. He was the slowest bird, in fact, and one of the last to be released.
The blue leg band helps to identify the birds while they're in this area, specifically for our purposes. The blue color indicates that it's a bird that was hacked in 1994. The birds are also banded on their right leg with an aluminum federal band, and these bands will help us track the population as it moves around. By whenever a bird dies, the band can be returned to the United States. These birds migrate to South America, where they'll spend their first entire year there. They will not return to the United States, and then their second year they will come back to the United States for the summer. They will come back to their natal site, which in this case is Moraine State Park. They probably will not mate, however, until they're 3 to 4 years of age.
The workers right now are basically monitoring the birds in flight, making sure they're feeding on their own, keeping fresh fish available for them to come back to throughout the day. Ospreys were at one time very widespread throughout Pennsylvania on all the major waterways. Around 1950, they suffered the same consequences as the bald eagle and many other birds of prey with the use of pesticides and DDT. The osprey populations began to dwindle to the point of pretty near extinction in the state of Pennsylvania. In 1980, a hacking program was began in the Pocono Mountain region of Pennsylvania with the efforts of Dr. Larry Ryman, who is from East Stroudsburg University and is also involved with bald eagle and river otter reintroduction. The Moraine Preservation Fund contacted him about 2 years ago about the feasibility of putting a hacking program in the process at Moraine State Park. Moraine and Lake Arthur was chosen ideally because it's a good location. This is the major inland location for an osprey hacking program. It's in a good centralized location to get the ospreys to spread to Ohio, New York, West Virginia, and also into other parts of Pennsylvania. It's a 10-year program, 5 years of reintroducing the osprey. So the next 3 years we'll be getting in ospreys every season. And then the 5 years after that is on monitoring the ospreys as they return from migration. The ospreys here will start to migrate from this region around the end of August, and they'll migrate to Central and South America. They won't return to this area until about 2 to 3 years from the time they migrate. It takes them that long to develop their homing instincts. But once their homing instincts are developed, they'll come almost directly to the hacking tower right where they were raised from.
Well, the birds you see around the tower right now aren't really totally self-sufficient at the point that they don't know how to fish on their own yet, enough to support themselves. A good sign when the birds are self-sufficient without actually seeing them fish is when we're not spotting them as much, when they're not coming around the tower as much, they're starting to disperse out around the lake. That's a good sign that they are becoming self-sufficient, and it takes a little bit of time. We have a wide variety of ages with these birds. Some that when they arrived were close to 5, 6 weeks old, and some were about 4 weeks old. So the 4-week-old birds naturally are going to take a lot longer to learn how to fish on their own, and they'll be the last to stay around the tower. It's kind of hard to judge when that will happen. That's why we spot the birds at least twice a day, try to get the band numbers, and try to record who is sticking around the tower, who is fishing on their own, and who is not.
Now, when we take ospreys from other nests, all of our ospreys are taken from the Chesapeake Bay area. When we take the ospreys out of nests, we take them with nests that only have 3 young in the nest. That way we can leave at least 2 for the parents to raise. And also we're ensuring genetically that hopefully these ospreys will produce triplets in the future. And we usually take the runt of the litter, which usually does not survive anyways in the wild. We take them when they're about 6 weeks of age. That way they've already developed parental instincts, the paternal and maternal roles that they need to know to survive in life. And also they're able to regulate their full body heat. Ospreys are considered to be a fish hawk. 99% of their diet is fish. They'll eat fish as long as they can see it from the air near the surface of the water. They'll feed on it.
Well, first of all, you can't reach in there because they'll kill you. Okay, they got really big beaks and they'll rip you apart. They're not used to hands. We never put a hand in the cage. Okay, we only put a stick in the cage because we don't want them to imprint on human beings as a source of food coming from a hand. Okay, so they could rip you apart with their talons or their beak. They're frightened of you coming in there. And second of all, just being a volunteer here, the only instructions I had before I started an overnight here was a book that they handed me, which didn't tell me a whole lot. And in that book it said, if you run into any problems, don't try to handle them yourself. So I didn't. I did call for help over the radios. But by the time the help got here, I had freed the bird with just sticks. So we mostly just work with them with just sticks because we don't want them to see human being hands, and or we don't want to be ripped apart by them.
Ospreys are very aerodynamic. They're almost like an oversized falcon. They have a wingspan that can reach up to 5.5, almost 6 feet in length. But they're very streamlined. They're able to dive into the water from 60 feet up in the air and dive directly into the water, sometimes almost totally submerging themselves in the water to capture a fish. Their talons are specially designed to hold and capture prey, and their feathers are also specially designed to get wet and for plunging into water.
Since these are young birds, these birds will most likely migrate in the next 3 to 6 weeks, which puts them at about the end of August to the middle of September. If they were older birds and had a nest and had raised young, they probably would not migrate until later in the year. Migrating osprey can be found in this area as late as middle October. They then migrate down to South America. It takes them approximately a month to get down there, where they spend probably another 3 or 4 months, and they start migrating back north again in March to April and May. Once they're down in South America, they usually spread out over a considerable amount of area, very unlike what the nesting colonies that you find most of the ospreys associated with in North America whenever they nest. Whenever they are in South America, they pretty much are loners. The mated pairs stay together, but they do not make another nest. The only time they nest and raise young are when they're in North America. They also are kind of unusual in the fact that they avoid areas where other migratory birds tend to flock to. They're pretty selective in their sites, and they try and avoid areas where there's a high population of other types of birds, even birds like songbirds that would not be competing with them for food.
We originally were planning on building nesting platforms to try to encourage the bald eagle to come to Moraine State Park, but the bald eagles are not quite as tolerant of presence of human beings. Ospreys are much more tolerant of human beings as long as the environment is safe and clean. We've installed numerous nesting platforms for the ospreys to build nests in once they return, and they're similar to bald eagles in the fact they'll return to the same nest every year and add to the nest every year until it can become a very large structure weighing hundreds of pounds. Their only major predator is whenever they are not quite ready for flight, and great horned owls can pose a serious problem. But they'll chase off bald eagles and any other birds that come near their nesting area. When the birds first take their first flight, sometimes they see the forest canopy as being a solid platform to land on, and they crash through the forest canopy, which can cause problems also.
The stairs lift up, and then you have to lift them all the way up to here, and this bar comes across into here, and then we lock it there. This is the counterweight to them here. They're really pretty heavy, and they usually take 2 people to lift them up and 2 people to pull them back down. And that keeps the coons from getting there. You can see all the metal all around all the posts here also keeps the coons from getting up there, because the raccoons would go up and eat the baby birds. And also bears, and there was a black bear through here about a week or 2 ago. But the bears could go up and attack them too, and maybe even the skunks, anything that could endanger them. But this is put up every night, and then it's brought down in the day. These 2 little wings here just allow us a spot to sit, and this is a real nice spot to sit with the scope, or stand with the scope and be able to watch the birds. We have to spot them all every day, hopefully, and read their tags so that we know that all the birds have been seen daily. We have a cooler full of fish or buckets full of fish. Sometimes we have live fish or dead fish. The fish are collected from different pickups along the lake. that have signs on them if people want to donate fish to the Osprey program, and there's also fish at the DER, and also there's fishing rods down there, and some volunteers when they come just go down and fish. So start with a nice fish, and here's a nice big cooler full of them in here. Alright, now this is pretty big here. This one we'd have to chop up, but this is a nice size for them presently. But when they were little, you had to chop them up. You had to take the tail and the head and the wings and just pretty much give them fillet pieces on a stick.
One of the largest problems with the migration of the osprey is that once they leave the country, they are no longer protected. A lot of environmentally detrimental pesticides are used down in South America, and the birds can pick up these concentrations, which is concentrated up through the food chain, and by the time it gets to the birds, it's a significant amount, which has an effect on their ability to reproduce and their regular health in general.
Our hacking tower is considered by some to be called the Taj Mahal of hacking towers. It's the largest one known to be in existence. We have the capabilities of hacking out approximately 24 ospreys at a time out of this tower. There's only about a 50% success rate, which is pretty high. In the wild, it would be much lower. And usually we have about an equal split of females to males. When the birds first arrive, usually it's around the 1st of July, the first thing that is done is a physical examination and the banding of the birds. The birds have 2 bands on them. One is a United States Fish and Wildlife Service band, which is aluminum, silver-looking band. The other one is a color band specific to Pennsylvania and specific to that individual bird. The bands are very important. We're able to tell where they go to on migration, where they are feeding. If one suddenly turns up, happens to die, we'll be able to track it, find out how far it has gone. We found one osprey in the early 1980s migrated to Peru. A gentleman found it. Somehow it died in Peru, and they found it and tracked the bands down, and they found out it took 30 days for it to fly from the United States to Peru. After the physical exam and the banding, they are placed into the individual nesting stalls, where they'll usually stay for probably about 2 to 4 weeks, depending on how old they are when they arrive. We feed them small pieces of fish at first, and eventually they graduate to eating whole fish. When the birds start to exercise their wings, we know they're ready to possibly maybe try to take their first flights. So we open up the cage doors, and the ospreys start to take their first steps into the outside. They'll maybe stay outside for 1, 2, maybe 3 days, exercising their wings until they're strong enough to be able to support them in flight. And eventually they take their first flies around Lake Arthur.
I think it's going really well. We have 24 birds this year. Last year they only had 6. 24 is a lot better because the mortality rate's really high for these kind of birds. They have to migrate all the way to Argentina. They have to learn to find their own food. They don't have adults to really teach them things here. So hopefully if we get out of this batch 6 back, which I think they hope to get even more back, but I think 6 would be really great to get back and repopulating these wetlands up around this way of the country with ospreys. We had them here a lot of years ago, and everything's been wiped out by the pesticide use. So it's up to us to now bring them back because we're the ones that destroyed them.
A lot of distinguishing characteristics about an osprey to determine whether an osprey is different from an eagle or from a hawk or from a vulture. Usually they always fly with a crooked wing pattern. They almost look similar to a seagull in flight. They're mostly brown, with usually a white breast, with white speckled in their back. Their head is mostly white with a distinguishing black band that covers across their eyes and down their cheeks. Their talons are very specially designed. They're the only raptor that has a reversible toe. They have 4 claws. One of them can move either to the front or to the back, depending on whether it wants to perch and sit or capture a fish. A lot of birds of prey may look larger than the osprey, but that's due to the streamlined aerodynamic build of the osprey. They may look small, but they're actually a very large bird.
This is how we would feed them now. We get our little stick up here, and we poke a hunk of fish on the end of it there. And this is a two-way mirror, one-way mirror actually. They can't see us, but we can see them through here. Okay, and then you would lift this up here, this little flap, and you just put your stick in there and hand it to the bird, and you noted what bird it was, and you had to always note how much each bird ate. This one's still intact yet. We can actually open that one up and look at it. Most of them have been cleaned by now. This one hasn't. Okay, you can look inside and see the nest and the trellis down, and then the gates at the end were kept closed until the birds inside this particular cage demonstrated enough behavior to be released. In other words, they had to be flapping around an awful lot. And then a lot of times when they've released them too, they didn't fly right away that day. They'd sit around the edge maybe for a day or two till they'd take off and fly. It was really incredible to watch some of them, the first flight that they made. Some of them are really floppy, and other ones just simply take off and go miles. But you can see the branches in that were in there, and the trellis down in the bottom, the grapevine that they used to make the round nest there. Okay, and there's a string in here that actually pulls them all up. This string's missing. They're all missing. They're all hanging down there. Okay, the strings were attached up into here so that we could release them down and let them out. They said 70 volunteers is what I heard, so I'm just one of the 70 volunteers. There's a whole group. They have around-the-clock a schedule every week is made up, and the woman usually calls me weekly to see when I can volunteer because I work sometimes quite a lot of hours, but I still try to get at least a 4-hour shift in here to volunteer. So today's my day off, and I'm volunteering this morning.
The Osprey program would not be a success if it wasn't for the many agencies involved, including West Penn Power, Central Electric, and Armstrong Utilities for donating and mounting some of the poles. The Moraine Preservation Fund, of course, for getting the entire program underway here at Moraine State Park. We also worked together with the Pennsylvania Fish Commission, Pennsylvania Game Commission, United States Fish and Wildlife Service, and the Department of Environmental Resources, the Bureau of State Parks. Also, some funding has been used from the Wild Resource Conservation Fund, which is your tax checkoff money here in the state of Pennsylvania. If it wasn't for the many agencies working together, the Osprey hacking program would not be the success that it is.